I'll have to speak very fast because I've prepared a couple of slides, so I'll try to fix this in 10 minutes. Essentially, I could already stop my presentation here because I would like to point to the presentation of Mr. Alexandridis, which in my view raised the key issues and gives a very good introduction to what is at stake here. At the same time, I would like to welcome that this event takes place because it comes very timely, as you will see from my presentation where I try to outline what the EU perspective of the digital dividend dossier is. I'll start with a couple of slides where I'll try to recall where we come from. Why are we talking about the digital dividend and why are we talking about the transition to digital broadcasting? Well, there are two main reasons in our view. The first one is we want to improve the quality of broadcasting. There is no doubt about this, and there are many issues at stake: more channels, picture quality, interactivity, etc. But there is, and that was from the outset also one concern of the European Commission, there is the issue of gaining spectrum by using it more efficiently. And this is allowed through digital transmission possibilities. For recalling, the Commission from the European level has been involved in this dossier rather early. We did not set a date for the transition, but we did in 2005 an analysis and came to the conclusion that by 2012 the vast majority of the countries should have switched off, that is, no longer analog TV and only digital transmission. We also encouraged the Member States to submit action plans on how they would deal with the transition. Then I would like to recall the ITU conferences, the regional conferences RRC04 and RRC06, which were essentially technical conferences to plan spectrum in the expectation of digital broadcasting. Then there was the international conference WRC07, where we from the Commission pushed very strongly for changing the allocation of the UHF band so that mobile communications would have co-primary status. We did not call, and this has been misunderstood, for allocating the whole of the UHF band for mobile applications exclusively, but we wanted to have the possibility to accommodate these services in the UHF band. And finally, in November 2007, we issued a communication on the digital dividend, which I will elaborate a little bit further. This followed opinions by the Radio Spectrum Policy Group. This is an advisory group where senior representatives from member states advise the Commission. The situation today is that you have 5 countries which have already switched off. So Luxembourg, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland. You have a certain number of countries who are going to switch off from now until 2010, and then a certain number of other countries who have announced that they would want to switch off by 2012. We should be very clear what we're talking about when we talk about the digital dividend. Essentially, I would like to focus on the UHF band. The UHF band, which today in most of the countries is more or less exclusively used for broadcasting, that is the big yellow circle. When we take the capacity of broadcasting today and transpose it on a digital broadcasting mode, it will use technically and by the laws of physics much less spectrum. And all the spectrum which is aside this in the UHF band is called the digital dividend. That is the definition we take. As we all know, the digital dividend is a unique opportunity to meet challenges which are coming from the increased demand for spectrum. There is a lot of discussions on how much and how big the digital dividend is, and I will not dwell on this one here. I think every member state has to do its homework, and I think Greece will have to go through this as well. But I would like to point out that if you look at what the member states have reflected, the range of the digital dividend is between 0 and 200 megahertz somewhere. Now, those member states who say that there is no digital dividend are increasingly in a minority, and I think it cannot be disputed that there will be a digital dividend, and even if it is only part of the UHF band, it is still a very valid spectrum. In addition, we have also white spaces, that is spectrum which is allocated to broadcasting but locally unused, which could be used for other applications. What is very important, I think there will be a session on this one, is that technical developments are going further. We will see new techniques, encoding, single frequency networks, DVB2 is around, What this means is that the digital dividend, as we can see it today, is likely to increase. The process is not one which stops today, it will go on. If we design an approach to digital dividend, here are 5 points I would like to elaborate a little bit which need to be taken into account. First, if we reorganize the band, we need to have a reflection what are the likely usages to be done with these bands. Secondly, we keep in mind that electronic communications are evolving. Thirdly, there are the laws of physics. We have to avoid interference. There are technical constraints governing this process. Fourth, and that is one point which I will stress, we from the Commission think that coordination at EU level brings an added value. And finally, the way we deal with a spectrum has to do something with the discussion on how spectrum management should be reformed. First point, there are a lot of demands for the digital dividend around. This list of applications does not correspond to the list we think should automatically be accommodated in the digital dividend, but these are usages which are discussed. Broadcasting, obviously, wireless broadband access, quite obviously, but also public services like security, civil protection, or even unlicensed usages. So everybody wants to go into the digital dividend. Secondly, I think we should realize that electronic communications are evolving. Digitalization spurs convergence, everybody knows this, but what this means is that the traditional link between networks and services you provide over networks is breaking up. And that holds also for broadcasting, where the same content can today be broadcast over different platforms. Also, there are a lot of new services emerging, multimedia transmission, interactivity, the peer-to-peer phenomenon, on-demand broadcasting, etc. The second point we need to keep in mind is that society is increasingly mobile. It's not mobility only, as you know it from your GSM, it's also nomadic usage combined with fixed. The important thing is that everybody wants to have his personal environment wherever he uses it. Last point, the Internet becomes sort of a lifeline for information. I'm not talking about the Internet services only which you know today, but we need to realize that the Internet increasingly is also a vector for information and even for culture. And then there's, of course, the Web 2 phenomenon with a lot of users becoming producers of content. And finally, the vision of Internet of the Things, more abstract, but certainly a reality in a couple of years. Technical constraints, essentially I'm talking here about interference. The matter of fact is that the types of networks we know today not only coexist very well, and without going into technical details, what this means is that you need to separate them, and this is usually done by guard bands. Now, you have two options. Either you mix all networks in a given spectrum band, and each time you need to protect each network by a guard band. That is relatively inefficient because you need a lot of guard bands, so you lose spectrum. Or you try to group types of networks, and then essentially we'll have to separate only these two groups by one guard band. That is more efficient. Coordination of at EU level. Well, we should realize that the UHF band so far has been subject to what is called band planning, and it has been planned exclusively for broadcasting. So what happened in RRC 06 was a plan for digital broadcasting. There was no demand analysis for other applications than broadcasting, and we have now a slight opening that in the WRC this band has, or at least part of it, has co-primary status also for mobile communications, as a rule from 2015, but in some cases for some member states also earlier. Secondly, there has not been a coordination at European level. The planning of these bands has essentially been at national level with, of course, a need to coordinate with geographical neighbors. And that has led to a non-coherent application of WRC results. Broadcasting is still very much perceived as a national and local issue for local audiences. We do think, and I will dwell a little bit on this later, that there are synergies and advantages of shifting towards a common path at EU level. Finally, reform of spectrum management. That is a wide debate, notably in the context of the reform of the regulatory framework for electronic communication services, of which broadcasting forms part. Key issues are how flexible should we use spectrum, how can we simplify the access to radio resources so that we make best usage, market-based approaches, unlicensed spectrum come in play here, and how can we better coordinate EU level? Obviously, this discussion is in the focus of the debate also when we talk about the digital dividend. What does all this mean? What should be the strategy for the digital dividend? Well, the first thing is we need to create conditions for a flexible usage. We need to be neutral in usage, not pick services and put them somewhere in the digital dividend, but try to leave it open as much as possible. We need to be future-proof because technology is evolving. We need to shift the decision on how to use the spectrum as much as possible to users. Obviously, and in the first place, we need to prevent interference. And we need to be also technically efficient in the